Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hope you're doing well. If you're new here, welcome to it. My name is KSM. Joining us today is my good friend Seva, aka
Hello.
Seva Artery on Discord. What's going on, Sev?
Not much. Yeah, nice to talk to you. Nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise, man. And to paint a picture in broad strokes, we'll just be talking about life, psychedelics, and the nature of reality. So, yeah,
Mm.
thanks so much for being here, bro. How is
Yeah.
life over in the UK?
Well, obviously, yeah, with the lockdowns and everything, it's been a bit challenging lately, but yeah, generally things are quite good at the minute. And hopefully, same's true for you over there in Australia.
Yeah, we've just gone back into lockdown as of, I don't know, like 3 days ago, 2 days ago.
Hmm.
I'm already losing track of everything, and uh,
Yeah.
it is what it is. I mean, I finished work on Friday, and it was going to be locking down at midnight, I think. And
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I'll just go to the shops and buy some food. And you go to the shops, and there's no food on the shelf.
Yeah. There's usually plenty to go around. It's people panicking. Just makes no sense at all.
Yeah, gotta hoard that food and toilet paper. Like it's going out of style. Like we haven't
Yeah.
just done it all before, but it is what it is, and they're just trying to push the vaccine on
Hmm.
everyone and doing just a terrible job rolling it out. And
Hmm.
there's been people on the news sort of complaining about lining up for 4 hours, and they've made
Yeah.
a booking, and the IT is all just in shambles and. Yeah. So, I mean, how is it? How is it there? Like, are you in lockdown at the moment?
Uh, Kinda, yeah. I mean, we were in lockdown for quite a long time here. A lot of all the restaurants and the pubs and things have been shut. They're just starting to reopen at the minute. So you can eat inside at a restaurant at the minute, and at the pubs and things. So yeah, we're kind of just coming out of it now. I think the UK is fairly advanced on how many vaccines and stuff they've rolled out to the population. So fingers crossed things will kind of get back to normal in the not too near future.
Not too distant.
Yes, not too distant future. Indeed.
Yeah. Well, I think this current one over here is meant to be just
Hmm.
a 7 day, but
7 day.
that remains to be seen. We've been told certain things before, and it's turned out a little bit different. So
Certainly.
we shall see.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think I don't know what to talk about first. We've got so much.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
at least here in my notes, I've got a lot.
yeah, I think you might be a
um,
little bit more prepared than I am.
yeah, I'll try and guide things in and try and keep it interesting for you and for everyone. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
probably
apologies in advance. I've only just woke. I've not been up. I've not woken up
yeah.
long. So
I think we're both pretty tired, and it is what it is.
yeah, I actually tried. I was actually smoking some DMT last night,
I
which was
remember this.
interesting.
Yeah, we were doing a call, and yeah, it was the first time I think for you, and
Second, well,
well, you
yeah. So
jumped in, and
um,
yeah, you jumped in, and then went back later on to check it out again.
yeah,
What method did
definitely.
you use, and what did you think of it for your first time and second time?
So I ended up getting a vape cartridge, like a pre-mixed one, um, which in retrospect probably wasn't the best idea. But I mean, I guess it's like a good introduction.
Mm,
Um, I definitely didn't break through, as people refer to it as, but it's very intense. It's very much in your face. I think with other psychedelics such as LSD, the visuals is kind of like seems like there's kind of a space. It's happening a little bit away from you. But with DMT, it's very much right in your face. Comes very much up right in your face. It's a little bit jarring.
mm,
I don't know about if you've had experiences like that.
yeah, definitely. It's I think, like I mentioned, there's some sort of communication etiquette that we have in nature and in life between humans and between just other beings in general. But then you sort of come across this, you get into this flash state and you come across this hyper intense communication of some very alien seeming quality.
Definitely.
And it's not, like you said, it's not sort of just you sort of looking at it out there like, and sort of pondering it. It's more just like,
boom.
It's just like, it's right up there, and it's not pulling any punches. And I think, did you find a similar thing with like it sort of shifts, like as soon as it appears and you're sort of trying to get a handle on it, it'll shift to the next thing? And
it's very disorientating, because as you say, it's, within 30 seconds of smoking it, you're just instantly transported to like some other alien world. And as you say, it's very much in your face, and it's very disorientating because you're kind of thinking like, what even is this? What am I looking at here? And then as soon as you as soon as you think you know what you're looking at, it's changed into something else, and you're just like, whoo.
Yeah, and it starts all over again, and then that repeats, and then repeats and repeats, and you're just kind of like, and then it's there. You come back, right, and it's kind of just like, what happened then?
Yeah, and it's quite difficult to remember most of what happened.
Yeah, so I think I was having a think about it last night, and there is quite a lot of sort of, it's like an analog for dreams in some sense. Yeah. Even like the shifting scenes, how it changes so often, and it's almost like you're in a dream that lasts for like 1 second or maybe 1.5 seconds, and then it shifts into the next one.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, also like the memory thing, it's not a lot of it's getting written into.
It's almost like it's too much information for your brain to record.
Yeah, it's not getting written into storage. So I think one of the first times that I had Changa, I tended in that case to be able to retain quite a lot more of it.
It's interesting because when you smoke it, it kind of lasts, maybe 5 minutes, and from the 2 times that I've done it now, it's not really had much, not really gotten much out of the experience at the minute, because it's so, it's so quick and it's over so quickly. Not really getting much out of it. Whereas if you do something like LSD and it's, it could be like a 12, even a 15-hour trip I've had at some point, I think you have a lot more time to kind of introspect, and you gain a lot more value from it.
Definitely. And like it does happen with acid as well, is you can get into places where it's not being written to memory.
Certainly. Yeah. That's why I find it's a good idea when you're doing LSD or mushrooms, perhaps, to kind of, you can take notes during the trip, and then later on afterwards, when you're looking back at them, it's a lot easier to kind of recall certain things which happened, which you might have forgotten. You don't need to. It's not like you don't need to write a book about it. Just like short notes about stuff that you're thinking or stuff that you're seeing. You just make a little note of it.
Yeah, and it's the same technique for learning to remember your dreams in the morning, is to just wake up, or even just if you wake up in the middle of the night and just write like a little short title for each sort of sequence, and that'll help you later on to go back, and it sort of pulls on this thread which sort of is attached to the experience.
It kind of jogs your memory, doesn't it, to a certain extent? You can read like a keyword about something which happened, then you're like, oh yeah, actually, and then you might remember something else which happened afterwards. It's like a chain reaction.
Yeah, memory is a tricky thing, man, because especially with like hypnosis and that whole, I'm sure you've heard of it, where people are sort of sitting in a room and just kind of hanging out, and then you talk to them afterwards and say like, well, what were people wearing, and they've got no idea. But then you put them into a hypnotic state and ask them the same question, and they come out with all these answers.
Yeah, that is interesting, because on multiple of my LSD trips, I found I'd forgotten a lot of memories from my childhood, and during the LSD trips, these memories started coming back to me, and it wasn't like I was necessarily trying to remember specific events which happened. It's more kind of like it arises naturally in your mind, and it's a lot easier to remember things which you've possibly forgotten. It's difficult to recall in like a normal state.
I think there's some big connection between the classic psychedelics like LSD and the child stage of human life. I think because as children we're still forming an ego and a self-identity and learning to identify with the thoughts that constantly run, but as a kid you don't really think all that much, and if you do it tends to be very simple, and I think that's part of the process of growing up, is to build up all these filters and sort of block out a lot of, like imaginary friends and stuff like that, stuff that sort of your culture might sort of just push under the rug, and sort of even just like lucid dreams. I tend to find that as a kid I could dream a lot more vividly and more with a lot more
imagination.
Yeah. There's so much that sort of gets just swept away and really kind of discarded almost as we build up these sort of.
That's interesting.
These sort of blocks, and
it's interesting.
Yeah, when you trip, it tends to remove the blocks and put you in a similar state to how you were before you sort of built up all this resistance to extraneous information and experiences.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because as children, obviously, the brains, it's a lot more elastic, I guess, in nature, where it's easier for them to form these neural patterns. And using LSD and mushrooms and things, it can put your brain back into that kind of, I think it's called neurogenesis, I believe, where literally your brain can start forming new connections between neurons. And it literally, so psychedelics, which produce this neurogenesis effect, really do allow you to change the way that you think about things. So previously in the past, I've had quite a bad anxiety, social anxiety, where if I was out in like a social setting or something, and under certain circumstances, I'd start getting paranoid about, what people are thinking, or if they're looking at me and all this kind of stuff. And I found that after using high dosages of LSD, a lot of these anxieties have gone. It really allows you to look back at yourself and realize that these kind of thoughts are irrational, and it really does allow you to kind of rewrite your brain and the pathways and how you think about things, and it really does have a benefit. It really is a tool for self-healing. It's not like a magic bullet though, is it, where you just take LSD and you're going to start feeling great. There's a lot of work that you need to do, I think, afterwards as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize that that is quite a lot of work, and it's not for the faint-hearted. But I mean, if you've got a good motivating factor, like something that you want to resolve, I think that's what's going to see you through. Yeah. So I mean, why don't we talk just a bit about your LSD experiences? I know you've been dosing up relatively high compared to standard sort of procedure, and just going in deep with a blindfold and headphones, and really just committing to the experience, which I find to be just a real demonstration of dedication to the cause, to really sort of study what it is for itself, with minus all the distractions of, say, being out at an event, surrounded by strangers, and yeah.
Yes, I mean, I've not been using psychedelics for a huge amount of time. It's only in the past kind of year or so, and in the past, I kind of always stayed away from them because it was kind of scary. I think a lot of people have issues. Everyone's got their own issues going on, and one of the things with psychedelics and LSD in general is a lot of those things can come to the surface, and you don't really have any control over what kind of things come up.
Yeah.
So you really do need to have kind of a strong mindset. And you need to understand that these kind of maybe unresolved traumas or things which have happened in the past, which you might not necessarily think about, but they're in the back of your mind, and these thoughts can still affect you. Yeah, I mean, I find LSD is more of a tool for healing, and it just so happens that the visuals are kind of like a nice side effect almost. I think first and foremost, it's not like me personally anyway, I'm not taking it to like have a really nice time. It's it really is a tool for healing that I'm using it for. So generally what I do is I have some headphones, like decent headphones that I use, and a blindfold. So I'll stick those on and lay down. And generally I do quite high dosages, what could be considered quite high dosages of LSD, I guess, usually between 700 and 1500 micrograms. 1500 micrograms is the most I ever took, and that was extremely intense. It was a very challenging trip, but it was very rewarding at the same time.
And you dose that all in one hit right at the start, yeah?
Yes, yeah. I find that even after a few hours, that's LSD specifically, your tolerance is already building, and because before I've done a few trips where after maybe 6 hours I took another 2 tabs and pretty much didn't have any effect at all. Yeah. So I would recommend to go big or go home.
Yeah, and just like hang on for that ride when it transitions, right? I think, do you find that tends to be some of the most difficult part, is the whole like one, it's 7 o'clock and I'm straight, and then it's 8:30 and I'm in a completely different space.
Yeah.
And that time period where you're transitioning tends to be like taking off in a jet fighter sort of thing.
It's I think probably the first couple of hours, even up to about 3 hours in, it can be quite uncomfortable. I just wish that you could like take it and then just be like, boom, it's on already. But it's this transition period's very difficult. It's quite uncomfortable. You can't really find like a comfortable spot to lie down. You're constantly moving around, and after about 3 hours, I find it kind of smooths out once you get into the flow of things. And if you just, with the blindfold on, you really can like explore your own mind.
And do you start off from the time you dose? Are you already blindfolded and with headphones, or do you wait a little while before sort of locking into it?
Yeah, so usually I do wait maybe an hour or so.
Yeah.
Until I can start feeling it coming on quite heavily, and then I'm like, okay, now it's time to kind of put the blindfold on, put these headphones on, and just relax and see where your mind takes you, basically, and see what happens.
And it's I mean, the highest doses I've ever done is 700 mics roughly. It could have been anywhere up to 1400 at a guess, but I felt that coming on within 15 minutes the first time I tried that. So what's it like for you? I mean, how long after you dose do you start to feel it? Because I know that was different. It was with liquid, whereas you tend to use tabs.
Excuse me. So probably within half an hour to 45 minutes. I find that's probably when you start getting the closed eye visuals. And I don't know about you, but I get very, very intense closed eye visuals, which are, that's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely on mushrooms, it's sublime, the visuals. It's really just, you're almost wasting them if you don't close your eyes, because it just is really another dimension, and
Yeah.
it's really good to appreciate it while you're in there, and sort of just pay attention, and just most of the time you're just in awe, complete awe, and just astonished and humbled, and sort of just like, wow. I mean, just where can you see this in ordinary life?
Yeah.
It doesn't really exist.
Certainly, yeah. And I find these experiences on these high dosages, they are, I'm 30 years old now, so I've had a fair bit of life experience. But these experiences on LSD have really, truly, and I can't, overstate this enough, is just the most beautiful experiences of my entire life. It's indescribable, and it makes me a little bit sad that 90% of the population will never experience these kind of things. And I've been in tears multiple times just looking at these visuals, and the colors especially, just kind of all the colors blending into one all at the same time, and these massive, just like sweeping big palettes of colors, and then you just find yourself, you're just crying because of how beautiful it is. And it's just like tears of joy, basically, about how beautiful and stunning the experience is. And it really is like a life-changing experience.
Yeah, and then how is it to come back from that? Do you feel like almost like a bit of a sadness when the experience is over?
It's interesting. Somebody else was, I was watching another podcast with somebody, and they mentioned something very similar to that, where they had ego death experiences a few times. And I've experienced ego death as well on these high dosages of LSD, where your entire field of vision is just all these fractals, and it really is like you get sucked into it, and your entire body just ceases to exist, and it definitely seems like these experiences are happening outside of your skull. And so this person was saying he doesn't take psychedelics anymore because of the experience of coming back from these, this ego death is very traumatic, because you don't really want to leave. You don't want to come back. That's the worst part.
Yeah, it's a re-entry. It's sort of breaking up as you come back into the atmosphere, like, oh, back to the grind.
I find so I did a 1500 microgram trip not too long ago, which lasted for over 16 hours. It just, it's at some point you kind of just, after about maybe 12 hours or something, you kind of just pass out and you wake up a bit later, and I find that there is like a really nice afterglow when you do these high dosages anyway, for a couple of days, after the experience. You just have this really nice feeling, and it's like an appreciation of life itself, and you can kind of see things from a different perspective than you usually would. So it really lets you appreciate existence itself, which is something I don't think most people think about. Like, we exist and we're having this experience right now, and if you really truly think about that, that is quite profound. Even the fact that we even exist at all and that we're having this experience is almost a miracle. But I think a lot of people, it's difficult to see it like that when you're going through the daily grind and you're working and all this kind of stuff. You lose sight of the fact that even just being here at all is very beautiful.
Yeah, and I mean, that goes back to the children thing. You hang around with kids, and you get a sense of the way they see life. And to quote McKenna, it's like astonishment is the proper response to reality.
There's a certain wonder, isn't there?
There is a wonder and a curiosity and a playfulness.
and just like an easygoing sort of chilled vibe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you find acid compares with DMT? I know you're new to DMT, but are there similarities? Are there differences?
So obviously I haven't had a breakthrough experience as such. You know, a lot of people talk about meeting these entities and breaking through to the other side, and seeing all these like cartoon images and all this kind of stuff. And I've not had that experience. The experience that I've had was very much similar to LSD visuals, but it was like an entire LSD trip condensed into 5 minutes. But as I say, I think the short duration of DMT, certainly when it's smoked anyway, I'm not really sure how much value you can get out of that. It's more like like you say, it's more like a flash of something very alien. I know we've talked before about other methods of taking DMT. So there's obviously ayahuasca and changa. I don't know if you want to explain about what those two are.
It's just basically the inclusion of a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, or a MAOI for short, and what that does is allow the DMT to stay in your system for longer before it gets broken down. So if you combine that in a smokable mixture, it's almost like smokable ayahuasca, and it tends to soften the experience and make it more digestible, more there's more insight, there's more sort of nuance to it. You can sort of come back with ideas from it, and still very intense, but mellowed. And I think the Maois have that sort of chilled, mellowing effect. That's part of what they do. And with ayahuasca, it's obviously designed to be able to ingest it orally and not have it just be destroyed in the gut straight away by the monoamine oxidase. Because DMT is a tryptamine, which is a monoamine, and we have enzymes in our body which will break down monoamines basically on contact, like instantly. And
if that happens, you don't get any effects from the DMT.
Right, so if you just eat DMT, nothing will happen, absolutely nothing. Which is a good sort of safety mechanism built into nature. It's hard not to appreciate that. It's but then again, it's also like, what is DMT really? I mean, it's in our bodies already. It's the body recognizes it when it comes into our system, and it knows what to do with it once it's in there, and it really quickly just pulls it to pieces and metabolizes it into nothingness, basically. And I mean, after DMT, you don't feel any different. Like 15 minutes later, you're back to exactly how you were before, except your mind is like slightly more blown, or, maybe extremely more blown. And ayahuasca is like a big cushion for that sort of, that impact. It's sort of, you can get a soft landing and sort of cruise in there and have like extended visions and really write a lot of it to memory, and have a lot more, I guess, potential for meaningful transforming experiences. And it's traditionally how it was done, but there's also snuffs where you sort of, it gets powdered material goes up your nose, and that bypasses the gut, obviously, and it's a way to have DMT enter your system. It's quite crude and harsh, and you start,
I can imagine it could burn.
you start, your eyes water, and you kind of fall over and scream. But I mean, the ayahuasca is definitely the way to fly, I think, in terms of DMT. If you want a healing experience that you're going to be able to have something to work with to integrate, it's worth the time investment to go and sort of
either go to a ceremony or make your own ceremony and just get in there and really do some work. And so it's got a similar afterglow maybe to acid. Like I know what you were talking about with the afterglow, and especially if it's a good trip, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that before where I've spent an entire week after tripping on like a fairly mild dose, but it was such a good trip, and it sort of really changed the way I looked at life.
Definitely.
To the point where it sunk in and stayed with me for an entire 7 days, and I was just happy for 7 days in a row, despite being severely depressed and anxious and all the rest of it. So,
yeah, as I was saying, I think for me anyway, one of the main purposes of psychedelics is a tool for healing. It just, the visuals are kind of like a nice side effect in my mind. And it really, really is a very powerful tool. It's not something to be taken lightly, of course, and maybe it's not for everyone. But I think certainly, people with certain mental health conditions, as you say, like depression, anxieties, and from my personal experience, I found it's extremely useful to have these experiences. Not only from the point of view where it allows you to kind of be much more introspective. You can kind of analyze your own personality and interactions with people. You can think very deeply about how you're interacting with other people, and it's kind of like allows you to have these realizations of, maybe I'm doing something in my life, and you can realize what you're doing and change that behavior. So it really is a very good tool. I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, I find that with acid, it's almost too intense in that sense of like the analytical focusing, that hyper sort of self-awareness that it can sort of slaps you around. Like it's a very masculine sort of like, this is who you are. Look, like, check it out, pay attention, because it's, you might want to do something about that, the way you've been living.
I would agree with that 100%.
So, I mean, with ayahuasca, I tend to find that no matter how difficult it is, and it's always difficult to a degree, at the end of it, I feel like I'm glowing. I just feel like I'm glowing and almost like floating in this mild but beautiful like euphoria, and that tends to last about 2 weeks. And it's worth it just for that, honestly. Yeah.
Agree.
Just to have like this deep-seated sense of peace and understanding, whether or not you sort of understand what you got out of it at the time. It's a physical thing. Like there's some sort of deep cleansing that goes on physically in your body, and I mean, they've done studies on people who are in these, legal traditional religions in South America, like UDV and whatnot, and they're super healthy people, and they've got low rates of alcoholism and violence, and they're just chilled and genuinely sort of healthy.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes, really.
It's a real shame. Obviously, back in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of scientific research being done into psychedelics, especially LSD. And unfortunately, it all got shut down by the government. And now we're realizing again, that these are powerful tools. And, that research is kind of starting back up now. But, the past 30 years, imagine where we'd be now. You can imagine like a clinic that you could go to, you could book through your doctor or something, and you could go there and you could have like a guided ceremony. That's something I think we're probably heading towards, and I can see how that would be, valuable and useful.
Yeah, well, I think there's sort of remained this underground thread of even therapists and so on that have kept that flame alive, and just like, this is too important not to keep doing it, because it's so valuable as a tool for what we're trying to achieve, which is healing at the end of the day.
But I mean, my father, I was speaking to him last time I visited him, and he had stories about going to a hospital and with mental issues and being given LSD, like legal LSD.
Oh, wow. Really?
And they would dose him up and send him off on his way.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah, and he'd wander off and catch trams and visit girlfriends and just have a good time, sort of thing. I think maybe there was a bit less emphasis on the therapy component, whereas these days they're sort of trying to marry those two divergent sort of streams of, you know, like you've got the therapy and the therapist and the space holder and the guide, and you've got the substance itself, which is sort of the rocket fuel for the whole. It drives catalyst. The experience.
It's interesting. I mean, when you think about it like that as well, you know, if you think about traditional medications for mental health issues, it doesn't really address the root cause of most of these problems. So you've got, you know, antidepressants, you know, SSRIs and all this kind of stuff, and it kind of just, it's almost like putting a band-aid on the problem. It kind of puts you into this like dazed state where it's not really helping you at all. It's, you know, you can carry out your daily life perhaps a little bit easier, but you know, you kind of get stuck in these cycles where you're taking all this medication and you'll be taking it for the rest of your life potentially. Whereas with the psychedelics, it really allows you to introspect very, very deeply, and you can kind of get to the bottom of perhaps, you know, where these issues are coming from in the first place.
Yeah, that's a big part of the trouble is just the whole capitalist sort of viewpoint on like how do we make the most money possible from the most amount of people possible. Whereas, you know, if like the current MDMA therapy research for PTSD, they're getting results with 3 treatments.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not something the pharmaceutical companies want, is it? They're not in the business of curing diseases. They're in the business of making as much money as possible, which is a real shame.
It's the bottom line sort of thing. And I forgot what I was going to say. Something to do with just the MDMA treatment. Can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken MDMA before, and it can be very therapeutic. Obviously, one of the main things is you talk a lot, so it's kind of like a talking therapy. And you find, well, I found anyway in the past, where you kind of open up a lot more. Maybe things that you wouldn't necessarily usually talk about. It seems like it becomes a lot easier to talk about these, you know, maybe issues or problems that you face in your life that you wouldn't usually talk to your friends or someone about. But you know, if you just keep it bottled up inside you all the time, you know, that's when you start getting, you know, it starts to kind of fester inside of you, these kind of issues. If you don't kind of, there's a certain release, you know, there's like a weight that gets lifted off your shoulders.
Yeah, it's kind of like we carry, if we have some kind of trauma, we sort of cage it up inside of us and lock it away. And that cage is built out of fear. And so the MDMA dissolves that fear so that you can access that memory without the fear and sort of go through it. And that sort of rewrites it into your normal memories, but without that caged up fear sort of energy
associated with it.
But I mean, that seems to be the key with a lot of healing work is not to bypass it, not to go around it, not to avoid it, because that's what you've been doing and it hasn't worked.
Yes,
so
exactly.
What you've got to do is go through it.
Yes.
And whatever you can do to support that process, that's sort of what we're interested in, is finding ways to allow that to happen as smoothly as possible, with as little sort of damage and harm going on at the time that it occurs.
That's why I can imagine if you had some kind of clinics where you had like you know, someone who's trained in giving some kind of like therapy, you know, with psychedelic drugs. they'd be able to kind of guide you through those experiences. As I say, it's especially with high dosages of LSD, you don't really have control about what comes up, and it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you really do need to, it can be very, very difficult and very challenging at times, especially if you're just by yourself, and all these difficult things are coming up. But as you were saying as well, with these certain memories or traumatic experiences, sometimes we lock them deep inside us and we're not even aware that they're there. And they are there at the back of your mind, in your subconscious, and it can kind of project out from there and have real impact on your life. And you never know, like, when you do LSD and other psychedelics, these things kind of naturally just come to the surface, stuff that you weren't even aware of yourself. And you're like, you have a memory from your childhood or something which you'd totally forgotten. And then you were like, yeah, that is at the back of my mind, and it did have a real impact on my life at the time. So it's interesting that you can kind of work through those things. And as I say, you kind of get like a weight lifted off your shoulders kind of feeling. And it's just very good feeling.
Yeah. Do you remember any specific examples of that from your experience?
Not off the top of my head. As I say, I didn't really take many notes about that, but there's definitely things. Sorry, 1 second. So I have had some realizations before that a lot of who we are as people are made up from the memories and the experiences that we've had throughout our lives.
Yep.
And during some of these trips, I kind of noticed that I'd forgotten, a lot of my childhood memories, like vast swathes, where I can remember, I couldn't remember specific events. I could remember kind of the broad strokes of what happened. And I came to the understanding that was having a real impact on me, because if you'd forgotten all these, all these memories from your past that kind of make up who you are, it can have a real negative impact. And I found on these trips that I could start, all these memories from my childhood started coming back. It was interesting because at some points there was almost like a, how you have with a projector, like a film projector, and you have a sort of white screen that you pull down to project it onto. At some points, this white screen basically seemed to come down, and it was like a projector was playing memories from my childhood. And it was like literally playing them back as a movie, like you use full motion, color. There wasn't any sound. But I started to remember a lot of these memories from my childhood, and it was a very nice experience. And afterwards, it did kind of have like a benefit, kind of more of like a sense of being complete, something like this. So I mean, that's some of my experiences that I've had, which have helped me, where these memories kind of, you're not necessarily trying to remember them as such, but it's stuff that comes up naturally.
So it's kind of like a fragmentation thing, like a defrag for your hard drive of your mind.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And as I say, these psychedelics can put your brain into like a neurogenesis state where they're forming new connections, and perhaps, it's forming these new connections, and then you can access, certain areas of your memory which maybe previously had become inaccessible.
Do you think maybe it's important to know where you've come from in order to sort of understand where you are and where you want to go from there?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think a lot of, as I say, who we are, our entire personality and how we interact with other people comes from obviously the experiences in our life. And I found, that forgetting a lot of these things, it was almost like it was like a blank slate. Because it builds up your character over time and things like this. So it was really a very nice feeling to kind of remember some of this stuff, and
Yeah. So, I mean, where do you think all that is? Is it just a subconscious thing? And what difference does it make, like before and afterwards? And like I know you said, you sort of feel more complete, but is it possible to feel like 100% complete? Do you think?
That's a good question. What do you think?
I'm not sure. I mean, someone asked me that the other day, and I feel like
it's not something I've thought about.
I feel like you can make progress, but
well, that's what life is, isn't it? It's a constant evolution, a progression.
Yeah, and it must be evolving towards something, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What do you think that could be?
I'm not sure. I mean, I've read a lot about astral projection and these sort of other beings that you can meet out there, and they seem to be sort of very highly evolved and like
yes,
almost impossible for regular people to sort of encounter, just because of the fact that the radiation and the light energy that they give off is so intense. And it's not like bad intense, but it's just like super, some kind different. Of like hyper love from space or something. And it's just like,
I mean,
yeah, it's sort of secondhand information. So I don't have much direct experience with meeting beings or people like that, aside from maybe the mushroom. But I do. I mean, I'm open to the possibility that we can evolve to a point where, I mean, like Bob Monroe talks about these beings that once they've graduated from the Earth School, they sort of just disappear. They wink out and they're gone from like every known sort of vibrational dimension that you can sort of wander into. And he has asked about it, where do they go? And the answer is nobody knows.
That's interesting. I mean, I'm of the opinion that the true nature of reality is consciousness itself. It's a very difficult subject to really understand and wrap your mind around, but essentially, the only one thing that we know is absolutely true, that is absolutely real, is consciousness itself, because it's happening to us right now. It's like I found from my trips on LSD that the physical world, the physical reality, space and time, atoms, molecules, and all this kind of stuff, it's all emerges from what's referred to as universal consciousness. And it's, physical reality, what we perceive of as the world, this computer that I'm looking at right now, it's, from my understanding anyway, it's all holographic in nature. So basically, we are kind of like disassociated aspects within universal consciousness, and it's kind of looking back at itself from a different perspective. And because it's looking back at itself from a different perspective, that necessitates the need for something to look at from the different perspective, which is where the hologram kind of emerges.
Like a reflection.
Yeah, it's like a ripple. Yeah. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
It's tricky, man. Like, I find it interesting, but it's also open and mysterious to me, and I'm kind of content to stay in that sort of I don't know. I'm always interested in thinking about it and going over ideas and sort of just wondering about it, but I'm less of the mindset of trying to lock in like a certain, like a grand unified theory of everything. I think it might be just barking up the wrong tree sort of thing.
I understand that point of view, because I've had other people make the point, and kind of like, okay, well, even if you do have this understanding of the nature of reality and this kind of thing, how is that actually benefiting you in your day-to-day life kind of thing? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, there is that, and there also is like the whole dogma and the whole ideology side of things, which I see as kind of a trap for open-minded people, and like cults and stuff like that. It's like I'm not really interested in sort of signing away my sort of open state of mind to sort of just be locked into one rigid sort of framework, because we can only ever build models of reality. And my model is going to be different from yours, which is going to be different from your neighbor's cats, which is going to be different from the cloud that floats over all of us, and you know, and then like evaporates into nothing. So it's a perspective thing. It's definitely a perspective thing. And
that's interesting. I was just having a look at some of the notes that I wrote down here from one of my trips. So I wrote, you know, it's quite strange that other people even have a perspective at all. And then I also wrote, you can never see things from any other perspective than your own, which kind of links into what you were saying a little bit, where everyone's got their own different perspective on things. You know, two people are never going to have, you know, it's impossible for me and you to have exactly the same perspective as each other, you know, by necessity, because we're, you know, two different beings.
Yeah, but I'm not sure about that point of being able to temporarily at least achieve an altered perspective. I mean, that's what tripping is to begin with, and
certainly
there's stories, at least, of people who are into astral projection, and that they can sort of go into another body in another time, in another place, and live the experience of another human being. Maybe it's a past life, maybe it's a future life, maybe, like, you know, it's like it sort of stretches the limits of your self-identity. And like how that helps you or applies to your own life here and now, I'm not sure. And what it means, I'm not sure. But I mean, I know that there's reports of people who can, if you're proficient in doing that sort of work, you can actually be in two different places and two different bodies and two different minds at the same time.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's not something I've experienced myself at this point. Like, maybe I will, but yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Have you experienced ego death before?
I don't really have a really solid grasp on what that actually means.
Okay. So for me, it's when I have a blindfold on, and you know, the peak of these LSD trips, it's just your entire being ceases to exist. You go into a very, very deep kind of like trance-like state. You lose like a complete sense of your physical body. You know, I'm lying down in my bed. I just have no sense at all that, you know, I'm inside a physical body. It's just all mind, and you see your entire field of vision's taken up by all this consciousness field or something, and you kind of just get sucked into it, and it's very trance-like, and it's almost like you have like a quietening down of your mind. I find it's like you're not really having thoughts as such. It's more just you're experiencing whatever this thing is that you've just been sucked into. Your physical body doesn't exist at all. And I think it's, you know, if that's somewhat like what, you know, dying is like, as I've seen some people describe ego death as probably the closest thing we'll ever know to what dying's like without actually dying. You know, it's a very beautiful experience.
Yeah, I think I've had at least one or two of those, if not several. And yeah, I tend to agree. I think we were talking about this the other day. Like, I mean, the ego is kind of like it's a delusional sort of, it's almost like a concept that doesn't really exist. And so in that sense, like, what is ego death? Like, how can How can something die that was never really, it wasn't really a reality to begin with?
That's true. Maybe that's the ego death might be not the best word for it, but it's kind of a dissolution of the ego, I guess.
Yeah, I much prefer those terms. That I know it's just semantics, but to sort of dissolve your concept of self-identity and then rebuild it, or at least modify it when you sort of come back into it, because we need ego. We need to, like Alan
Wait,
Watts says, it helps to know when you go out to dinner whose mouth you put food into.
Which it's a very useful construct for survival, essentially, isn't it?
I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, are you of the opinion? What's your opinion on? Have you got an opinion on when we die? What happens? I mean, I'm of the opinion. We are part of this one universal mind, and we kind of just return back to it.
I think reincarnation is a thing.
What, like a karmic kind of?
Well, I mean, that's part of it, obviously, but
what do you think you're going to get reincarnated as?
Well, it's not that simple. I think some people are living simultaneous lives, from what I've heard. And
what do you mean?
Well, like, reincarnation is not necessarily a sequential thing, because when you're dead, time and space is not really a part of the game you're playing anymore. So,
that's true.
In the context of eternity, the limitations of time and space don't apply.
I would agree with that 100%.
So I think I do agree with the concept that the Earth is basically a school, and that we're here to learn, and that we're basically, consciousness is primary.
Yes.
And we cruise around in these vehicles for a while.
Meat suits.
And like, not to be flippant about it, I think it's a wonderful gift and like a truly precious thing to be born as a human and to have this opportunity.
I would completely agree. It's interesting as well because human beings are the only living organism that we're aware of that has metacognition.
Yeah.
Which means that we're aware that we're thinking. Basically, we're aware that we are aware. And it's interesting when you think about animals, things like that. They have awareness, but they're not aware that they're aware, kind of thing. And it's interesting that it seems like a lot of suffering. One of the human conditions is suffering, and this suffering comes from the gift that we have, which is metacognition, and that we're aware, and we can think about past actions that we've taken and stuff like this. Whereas if you think about animals, a lion doesn't sit and lament and to think about stuff that it did yesterday. It's just in the moment constantly, and it's a gift and a curse. It's a gift and a curse, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like a lion would experience transient pain now and then, but I mean, look at a baby. Look at a baby cruising around, and they'll bump into something and fall over, and they'll start crying and lose their shit completely. And then 5 minutes later, they're smiling and laughing, and they've completely forgotten about it.
Yeah,
but not. Well, I shouldn't say completely, because part of it is learning and part of it is still in there, and it becomes, it's, how you sort of build your map of the world and learn to navigate and not run into the corners of tables and things like that, like head first.
It kind of links into what I was saying earlier about how our experiences build up over time to kind of form who we are as people. And that starts as, when we're children.
So yeah, maybe it comes full circle at some point. I assume most things do.
Interesting.
Yeah, what do you feel like moving on to next? Do you have any thoughts, or do you want me to sort of throw something out there?
Let's go for it. Let me just quickly make a drink. What else have you got on your list?
I thought the other day when we were talking about astral projection, we sort of had some interesting ideas on like cloning and cloning human beings. And
okay. Yeah, sorry. You have to edit that out.
Yep.
The ice cream truck's just driving down the road, so he's coming in saying, "Ice cream."
just let us know when. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good?
Just before we move on to that,
sure.
One thing else I'll mention, since we were talking about, I think you were talking about these possibly like hyperdimensional beings or something like this. And to me, at least, it makes sense that, if consciousness is primary in reality, then, just because we as humans have physical bodies doesn't mean that every, conscious agent, necessarily has a physical body. I could imagine, beings existing without a physical body. So I can see how that could be true.
In between incarnations, like, between birth and death. Well, I mean, between death and birth maybe is a better way to put it.
Because it's interesting if you try and think, what was your awareness before you were born? Can you imagine what that experience is like?
Yeah, I think that's part of the sort of like some kind of agreement to, like, a prerequisite to be born into a body is to sort of blank that.
One of the thoughts that I had about kind of our physical existence was it's kind of like universal consciousness expressing itself, because it's infinite. It's trying to express itself in so many ways, and us as people are kind of manifestations of that desire to have all these different kinds of experiences, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like maybe it's a balancing act between, like what does eternity really mean unless you have time to compare it to.
Yes, because otherwise it's just everything happening simultaneously all at once. It's just everything. Well, it's everything and nothing, isn't it? Without time, it's just is.
Yeah, it's one single moment that could be a microsecond. It could be endless. And
it's infinite.
I think I've read a few good books by a guy called Jurgen Ziewe. He's actually got a YouTube channel as well, and he's a pretty interesting dude. And he talks about learning how to astral project during meditation. He'd sit and meditate for like 6 hours at a time, just going super deep, and came back with all these stories about learning how to just leave his body and go to these other places. And his view of life after death, I think, is that it's different for everyone. People sort of have these beliefs and expectations that they carry over with them, and then that sort of manifests into your next reality.
That's interesting, because one of the thoughts I had on some of these high dosages of LSD was if consciousness is the primary force in the in existence, then our entire universe is just like the tiniest thought in this universal consciousness. And then I came to the realization that our universe is one of an infinite number of realities which are all happening simultaneously.
Yeah, it's a grain of sand on the beach of hyperspace, man.
Exactly, and that's our entire That's our entire universe. So, you know, I don't think it's so far fetched to think something along the lines of if we die, we could come back in some alternate reality.
Yeah, I mean, you should check out this book called Multidimensional Man, and then he's got another one after that, and then another tiny little one called the 10-minute moment, about this sort of enlightenment meditation experience. He's got some dark stories in there about sort of rocking up into these spaces where it's like the aftermath of a suicide bomber.
Wow.
And it's the guy that did it that set off the bomb, and he's just surrounded by limbs and body parts, and just like fighting and struggling with it and trying to like tear away from, like, it's almost like he doesn't realize he's died. And he's just like kind of like sinking into concrete for an indefinite amount of time.
Like a limbo, what do they call it? Limbo, or like purgatory or something like this.
Purgatory. So very much like that, and like all the negative energies of that he sort of contributed to with all the families of everyone that he killed, sort of have turned back in on him. And stuff like that really makes you sort of reassess the way you go about living and the way you treat other people.
Definitely. Certainly. Yeah, it's one of the things I kind of get out of these psychedelic experiences. It allows you to kind of realize, you know, love is one of the most important things. And if you can, you know, it's interesting because I was reading something a while ago, and it was like true. Really, if you think about true unconditional love, it's something which is actually quite hard to obtain. I mean, you know, your worst enemies. If you've got truly unconditional love, you would love your worst enemies, and this kind of thing.
Yeah, well,
that's something which is very difficult. Like with the suicide bomber, for example.
Yeah.
You know, having unconditional love for that person, even though they've committed this atrocity. That is something which is very difficult for people to get past, maybe because of their ego and things like this. But if you truly want to change the world, that is the kind of thing that needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's compassion, which I think leads into that. And I mean, I think if you knew that particular person and how he ended up becoming a suicide bomber, you would feel love for him, because you would understand how he came to be there and that he thought he was doing the right thing. He just didn't know any better, you know.
But yeah, I mean, it seems if we really do want to change the world, it's, you know, it's all about love.
Yeah, and it has to start with you.
Not me personally, but ourselves. It's all on my shoulders, isn't it?
It's up to you, Seva. You've got to fucking
crap.
Save us.
No pressure, hey?
No pressure, no pressure. You are the chosen one. Only the chosen one knows the correct jiggle of the lock.
But another interesting tidbit, which I've just remembered, is some of these experiences I've had with the closed eye visuals on the high dosages of LSD with the blindfold on.
Yeah.
Kind of, you just kind of in the flow, and you're experiencing the wave, you're riding the wave, and everything's just kind of nice. You're looking at all these patterns and these colors, big swathes of colors which are coming across. And I found this happens quite regularly for me. Is that just like out of nowhere, these bright white lights start coming into view. So it'll just from the corner, it's just out of nowhere, somewhere you can't see, this like white light will just come across in your vision. And it literally is like, if you can imagine somebody shining a flashlight directly into your eyes, but your eyes are closed.
It's quite rude, isn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of, I think it could come back to maybe some of the stuff we were talking about earlier with the DMT, where it kind of seems like there's not really this much etiquette, and it's very much just like boom. It's interesting because, you know, it does seem, I'm not 100% sure, but it does seem like these are some kind of higher dimensional beings, perhaps. Because it just really is bizarre how they kind of just come out of nowhere, and it's this very bright white light which is shining directly in your eyes. And I always end up saying in my mind, like, you know, hello, is anyone there? Is, you know, all this kind of stuff. And when you do that, they do seem to kind of try and communicate with you, but they can't physically speak to you with words. It's the communication's done through colors, it seems. And it seems like through colors they can kind of transmit information to you, and it's not exactly.
I was saying that reminds me of an octopus or something.
Yeah. It's not exactly clear always what the information is that they're trying to communicate to you, but it almost feels like there's this download of data that's just happening, and it's very dense. It's very dense data. There's a lot of it, and it's difficult to kind of decipher exactly what it is. So yeah, I mean, there definitely is a sense of them trying to communicate something. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but there's kind of like a feeling that it's some kind of ancient wisdom or knowledge in some regards. It's very dense data, and it's all communicated through colors, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had any experiences like that.
Bob Monroe talks about when he's out of body, he'll be talking with beings, and it was a bit of a learning curve because it's all non-verbal communication. And he speaks about these things called rote balls, and it's a method of communicating where someone will hand you a ball of information and you just sort of tuck it away because usually it's too dense, like you say, to take in all at once. And then later on, you'd be able to open it up and run through it and absorb what it is. So I think my suggestion would be to maybe ask them, how can we best communicate, and could you please help me to understand better, because I'm sort of having a little bit of a difficult time with this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will try that. It's just
and maybe try to send them something in a way that you would find helpful yourself to receive. Like try to communicate, like sum up what you want to say and like pass it to them in a form that would be. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I will definitely try that. But it really is an interesting experience because it happens pretty regularly and multiple times per trip, and it's just very bizarre. It's just these white balls of light, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've had an experience on acid and MDMA once where I sort of became a floating ball of light on a dance floor.
That's interesting.
And it was well beyond the usual sort of visuals where you're kind of looking at almost like at a screen.
Yeah.
It was more just like 360, everything just fractalized, and I was completely one with it all and just floating and just I've
had some similar experiences on obviously these high dosages where you have the blindfold on and it's like you get sucked in, you go into this very deep trance, and usually I listen to some quite neo-shamanistic type of music. It's like chanting and, you know, these Eastern flutes and everything.
Yeah,
it can put you into a very deep trance-like state. And with the blindfold on, it's like usually on you know, lower dosages of LSD, like you say, it's kind of almost like it's like a 2D kind of sense. It's like you're looking at a computer screen where this stuff's happening. But when you do these higher dosages, it's like these 3D spaces start to form, and it really is like you're somewhere else, and all these just like recognizable 3D shapes start to form, and there's a sense of space to it. There's like a 3D space to these, whatever it is, these areas.
You were saying something about being able to zoom in to these places.
So yeah, it kind of sucks you in, and yeah, I remember now. Yeah, so I mean, obviously, when you're having these experiences with your eyes closed, one of the questions I asked myself was, where is this even happening? It's like I'm not looking at it with my eyes. And, it turns out that it's all happening in your mind's eye. So, your third eye, your pineal gland or whatever. It seems like it's all happening in your mind's eye. And you can, if you practice this, you can focus your mind's eye. And a lot of the times it's very difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult to even recognize what you're looking at. It's because it's so overwhelming. But if you focus your mind's eye, you can kind of get into this state where you're aware exactly what you're looking at. And it's like a recursive function where you're looking at it and then you kind of zoom in. It's very much like a Mandelbrot thing where you can keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in. And eventually you can go to these other places where usually it's, there's a lot of colors and stuff, but a few times I've been to these areas of consciousness where it's almost devoid of color. It's these dark, black and white areas, which is really interesting. I think some people refer to it as the void. I don't know what your thoughts are on the void.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like the prima materia. It's the source of all things.
Yeah. And then, as I say, if you can kind of focus your mind's eye and you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and eventually you start to get to these other places. And when I did 1,500 micrograms of LSD, one of the best experiences I had was I was doing this process where I was going deeper and deeper and deeper. And as you do that, the scale of things becomes very immense. There's like a massive scale. It's like it's almost like you're zooming in, but it's kind of like you're zooming out. And there's a very immense scale to things. And this very holographic in nature. It looked like it was being created by like some lasers, like laser light or something. And this massive in scale yin and yang symbol presented itself to me. And it was just huge in scale. It just seemed like it's hard to describe, but it was absolutely massive in scale. And it was just really interesting. It was showing me the light and the dark and how you can have creation out of nothing.
Yeah, I've generated the same vision or a similar vision before, and I've heard of other people doing it too on acid. Yeah, for me, when I saw it, it was huge, and it was moving.
Yes.
And it was like the two tiers, and I could recognize that.
Exactly.
My impression was that one half was tragedy and the other half was joy, and in between those was this like fluid, which was tears, and the tears are what enabled the machine to keep rotating.
Yeah.
And pretty soon I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's perfection. And as soon as I said that's perfection, I somehow got the sense that I'd tainted it. I'd put a label on it, and it somehow diminished its power or whatever, and it sort of began to fade after that. But that was a huge experience for me. Like one of the most clear visions. Normally when you have visions, it tends to be sort of undescribable, unrecognizable, quite alien, sort of...
Very abstract.
Yeah, super abstract. Whereas this was kind of like...
a structure, a clearly defined structure with purpose and meaning and definition and vibrancy to it that it sort of stayed with me. I was like, that's incredible.
Yeah, I had the same feelings, and it was like it was showing me, you know, life and death and creation and destruction. And it was, yeah, it's one of the best experiences of my entire life. That.
Yeah.
Very,
Have you
very,
ever
very profound.
have you ever messed with doing nitrous oxide on top of LSD?
I haven't. No, I've heard people doing that. Usually, I smoke some weed out of a bong
Yeah.
at the, you know, various points in time. But one of the things when you're doing these high dosages is extremely difficult. It's very disorientating as well. I find myself lying in my bed, and like if I had my phone next to me, I'd be like trying to find my phone and just like kind of looking around, and you just get very disoriented, and you find yourself like looking in the same spot over and over again. And then eventually you find that, or you turn the light on or something, but it is extremely disorientating.
Yeah, I guess I think when the dose ranges that you're sort of operating in, you don't really need anything extra at that point.
I find that smoking the weed really does help. It kind of one of the ways I can describe it is it increases the resolution of the visuals somewhat, and also the fluidity. The frame rate seems to become smoother in some regards.
Yeah, this whole frame rate thing is very interesting. I think,
Yes.
I mean, that seems to define what a breakthrough is on DMT, is that instead of the constant sort of like this, then this, and 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 then this, it sort of stabilizes and you just get one thing and get to sort of try to understand that for a little while.
Yeah.
And it's like a threshold thing. It's dependent on the dose, on whether you get enough in your system at one time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you're pondering experimenting with DMT on top of LSD.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, when you're doing these dosages of LSD, it is already extremely difficult and challenging.
Yeah. You might want to wind back the LSD level.
Possibly.
Yeah, to be able to function enough. Although with the vaping method for DMT, it seems quite user friendly and quite doable.
I think probably just one, you know, even just like a small hit from the vape pen of DMT, you probably. We'll see. We'll see. It's you need to have a very strong mindset, I think, to be able to handle that.
A constitution that can handle it.
Yeah, definitely. So something I'm thinking about, because I definitely would like to have a breakthrough experience on DMT and kind of meet these entities. I heard people talking about these like Joker entities and jesters, as you know, stuff like this.
Yeah, I think the whole waiting room thing is one of the most interesting experiences that I've heard about. Just like people just leave their body out the top of their head and go to this place where they're sure they've been there before, and they'll go there again, and they were there before they were born, and they'll go there after they die.
One of the things with the DMT I found was that the body load is quite high.
Yeah,
like a very heavy feeling on your body.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of that. It's
no, me neither.
Even at really light doses, it tends to be the first thing that comes on, and I think, like I said earlier, it sort of sets the tone for the trip, which is, I mean, there's got to be a way to compensate for that, because it's so like unwelcome for me. I just find the feeling really sort of like icky
kind
and
of taints the trip a little bit.
Like, really, do we have to have this as well? Like, it's it's got this undercurrent of just like, it's so hard to describe the way it feels.
Just uncomfortable, isn't it?
It's very uncomfortable. Yeah. But Yeah, to go back to the cloning thing.
Okay, yeah.
We were talking about cloning humans and like how does that work? Because it wouldn't have a soul, the clone. It would just be sort of this empty meat sack. But I mean, that's true, obviously. But I mean, if we trained or just signed up people who had trained for astral projection duties, who were proficient in such things, maybe we could get them to figure out a way to just simply exit their current body and enter the new body.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's difficult because if you imagine how far technology's come in the last 100 years, 100 years in the grand scheme of things is absolutely just a blink of an eye. And how we've gone from steam trains, for example, and now we're getting these Tesla electric cars and all this technology, virtual reality, augmented reality, and all this stuff. SpaceX as well, sending reusable rockets. We're now getting satellite internet around the world.
Yeah, it's not that much of a stretch to think that.
Well, that's just in the past 100 years. So, what about in 1,000 years from now?
1,000 years.
2,000, 10,000.
Yeah, I mean, will we even still be here? Is one of the main questions that we have to deal with at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I know there's stories about people who are trained in projection and they can meet entities and then allow, with full consent, that entity to come and use their vocal cords.
Like a channeling type thing.
Similar to that, but less flaky. It's like scientifically rigorously documented and like
that's bullshit, basically.
Achieved with sound frequencies and headphones in an isolation booth with a monitor, like paying attention and all recorded. And
it's interesting that you mentioned that because actually, the CIA back in the day, they, did experiments with remote viewing and things like this.
Yeah, the whole remote viewing thing.
I don't know if you've ever tried that.
No, not personally. Sometimes I think I've been paranoid that it's happening to me.
It is interesting because there are these weird phenomena within existence, and a lot of it's quite subjective. It's stuff that you can never really prove. But if you have the experiences yourself, it's quite convincing, some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's why I respect the work of Bob Monroe. He started an institute and it was very scientific with his sort of study of the whole thing. And,
so I think that Bob Monroe
he made the whole Hemisync gateway voyage program.
Yeah, so I was just gonna mention the Hemisync stuff because I've actually used that for some meditation, and I find it does work quite effectively. Where a majority of the time, I think they only last about 30 minutes each meditation, but pretty consistently I could get the sense of my body not existing anymore. I'm not sure if that's the same as astral projection, because it wasn't really like I was like navigating around somewhere else, but the sense of my body ceased to exist.
Yeah, it's just the early stages of sort of separating your soul or your consciousness.
What does he call it? The level 10. What is it called again?
Yeah, focus 10 to 21.
Focus 10, 20. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I'd love to do it more. There's something weird about it, which sort of I wasn't comfortable with for many years. Even though I'm super into astral projection, I kind of love it. But I was put off by something, and I got the tapes, and I don't know. I got the tapes, and I ran through just to check that I could trust what was going on, and then tried it with headphones in bed at night. And then I got a cold and got sick within 2 days, and I had to stop training, and I haven't gone back to it. So
yeah, it's one of the things which is kind of a recurring theme with some of the stuff that we've been talking about, with integrating experiences after psychedelic trips and meditation in general. You can even you can even use it as an analogy for life itself. It's like if you want to do something, you need to kind of put in the time and the dedication to do it, you know.
Yeah, and have the intention.
To get the results.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not going to just do itself. All this weed isn't going to smoke itself, sort of thing.
All this LSD is not gonna take itself.
not going to drop itself on the floor.
Yeah,
right?
That's an interesting segue into intention, though. I mean, what are your thoughts about setting an intention before doing certain psychedelics, and perhaps it's maybe something which is overlooked by a majority? Well, I don't know about a majority, but certainly a lot of people I find, maybe don't take setting an intention seriously.
I think maybe I was projecting my own experience last time I sort of mentioned that. Like maybe that's what I've been doing personally, to be honest. I think just overlooking the importance and the value of that in just life in general, just all of life. It's not just psychedelic experiences, it's everything.
Yes.
And to me, that's the way I've been trying to live for quite a long time, is just the sort of mindset that intention is everything. And even if other people think you're doing the wrong thing, if I feel like it's the right thing to do, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and do it because that's the way I live. And I think there's some authenticity in that approach, and there's also some levels that you reach where you can witness clearly the results of that and the effects that it has in your reality. And it's not a small thing to completely change your reality. And I mean, you don't generally do it all at once. You do it in bits and pieces here and there over time.
It's not to be confused with, you see all these videos on TikTok about manifesting reality and all this. That's a lot of bullshit.
Right.
But writing these certain numbers down and all this kind of stuff, just complete nonsense. But I find setting an intention deep within your own mind. If the true nature of reality is consciousness itself, then the one link that we have to that true nature of reality is our own consciousness. It's like a direct link to God almost. There's one way you can think about it. And I find that setting an intention before doing these psychedelic trips is extremely important. And I find that the intentions that I do set when doing this do seem to come true or manifest most of the times. So yeah, I mean, setting an intention deep within your own mind. And on one of these LSD trips, I kind of saw the mechanism which would allow the intention to manifest in reality. I can't describe what it was, but it was like setting the intention within your own consciousness sets it within universal consciousness. And then it showed me like the mechanism which basically would allow that to manifest. So usually, setting an intention such as healing, knowledge, these kind of things. And I find it is very important to do that before, just taking 5 minutes before you, after you drop acid or whatever, just taking 5 minutes to just meditate, close your eyes, set this intention, what you want out of the trip. And I find like a majority of the time it will come true.
Yeah, I mean, early on, I started like shrooming when I was 15. So, and like homeless a lot and struggling with school and all that sort of thing. So I think in the early stages, it tends to be overlooked, in my case at least, because for one, I didn't really know about it, and for two, like I had no experience with psychedelics and what they were capable of. But once you gain some of that experience and you learn just what it is that they do and what they can do and what the potential is, I think that gives you a good foundation to be able to work with them in the sense of being practical and not setting an intention like, I'm going to get $10 million in 6 days' time. It's got to be grounded in an actual reality, sort of practical,
agreed.
Yeah, and you do have to do the work. But I mean, recent trips I've really noticed, like I've had a few intentions and like they've all come true, and like even mild ones which I added in later, sort of like casually and flippantly, sort of just came through like in mind-blowing and profound ways that sort of really sort of made me do a double take and sort of step back and say, like, there's something actually to this.
Oh, certainly. It's interesting because, as I say, setting the intention before the trip is very important. But then as well, during the trip, if you think about those intentions quite deeply, I find almost immediately after thinking about them is when stuff starts to happen.
Yeah, I think it could go either way. Like you can consciously move through them, which is nice, or you can sort of set and forget and then go through an experience and then sort of on the other side of it look back and go, oh, that actually really linked into exactly what my intentions were. But
that's true.
I was just sort of going with it and not really paying
much. That's happened to me a few times where it's after the trip where you think about it like, oh, you know, one of my intentions was to, you know, gain some more understanding or knowledge, and that's when the yin and yang presented itself. And then, you know, after the trip, you're thinking back and you're like, you know, I did ask for knowledge and that's what happened. You know, it presented itself to me.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot in there that it sort of bleeds over into, as I said before, not just sort of peak experiences, but just the way you live day to day. I think that that function is it might be sort of amplified when you're in deep states doing the work, but it still operates during ordinary life. I don't think it's you know, it's quite very much in the background. And maybe it doesn't do any good to be aware of the mechanism by which it comes around. But it is interesting, and yeah, I think it's fascinating that you sort of got some insight into just that sort of, because it sort of would be like a validation of like just your intuition on the subject.
And as I say, it's very difficult to prove one way or another. It's something that you really do need to experience for yourself. But once you do experience it, it kind of clicks and you're like, oh yeah, that does make sense. And another thing was one of the mantras I think that you told me was, I am knowing better and I am doing better. And I really like that as just kind of a general thing for life, is if you have something like this in your mind, you know, it's kind of in the moment, you know, I am doing better and I am knowing better. And it's something, stuff like that I think can kind of improve the quality of your life, perhaps. Not you specifically, but just people in general.
It's me. I have to improve the quality of everybody's life.
But I mean, you're the person who told me that, so I don't know if you can expand on that any further.
Yeah, just know better, do better. That was my intention for, you know, how people sort of make New Year's resolutions. That was mine.
But it's not the, you know, I am going to do better.
No.
You know, all right, you know, it's I am doing better. Yes, very much in the now, in the moment, which I think is quite important.
Yeah, it's kind of a directive, like know better, do better, and then when you live that, you are knowing better and you are doing better.
Exactly.
And I think that means something different for everyone, obviously, but it's sort of vague enough to apply to, in general, to anybody's life. Like, you understand that without having to rationalize it and be intellectual and go through all the details of it. It just sort of, it's something that you can apply
to every aspect of life, basically,
like a filter. And
there was something else you said the other day, was something like if you want to do something that you've never done before.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's I found it in this really obscure random like
artist video. If you want to have something you've never had before, you need to do something you've never done before.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yes, it's good. I like that too. And I mean, it's true. Like, you can't argue with that.
It's interesting because I find like a lot of people, just normal people, are just so engrossed in their own lives and the daily grind of working, and
just survival.
Just survival, that they either don't have the awareness to take the time, or they're just not taking the time to kind of just even spend a small amount of time to reflect on certain things like this.
Yeah, I was talking with River yesterday, I think, about this big lesson that Tammy Peterson dropped in the Mikhaila Peterson podcast recently, which is sort of what she gathered from going through this huge cancer battle and coming out the other side. And basically, she was going on tour as like part organizer, part manager, to make sure everything ran smoothly with Jordan when he did his speaking circuit in recent years before he became unwell and all that. So she sort of had this mindset that she was kind of in the background, and she kind of felt a bit left out and a bit like, what am I actually getting out of this? Like, what's in it for me? I'm putting all this work in and it's no recognition at all. And it's kind of just like, why? And then she got really, really sick with cancer. And part of her healing process involved all these deep meditations, which, I mean, she'd been training and practicing meditation since she was 13. And it's kind of like her whole life built up to that point to be able to push through this moment and make it to carry on living. And I mean, she's in remission now, and she's still alive and still here, and we're all blessed to have her around. She's an amazing human being, and it's really, I recommend watching there's two podcasts that are currently out, and she's talking about making her own one, which it's kind of like, why haven't you done that already? Which is easy for me to say, but it's, it can be a bit of a process. But I mean, her shift in mentality was to stop looking at life that way, to stop sort of having that greedy sort of what's in it for me mentality, and to flip it around to say, what can I do to help? That's what I actually want to do. Is I want to know how I can be of service to people without any thought of anything in return. And that's basically what she dedicated her life to from that point on, once she recovered. So I look forward to hearing more from her, in those areas, and also just to reiterate it and to emphasize that perspective, because I think there's a lot of value in that, and just noticing in your own life when you can apply that, and when you've adopted that same mindset of, what am I getting out of this? This is stupid. I'm wasting my time and energy on something that is not giving me rewards, when you could easily just change the way you see the same situation and say, like, how can I contribute, and how can I help? How can I be of service, rather than what's going to be helping me, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as I say, a lot of people are just, it seems like almost in a daze, just going through life, daily grind kind of things. And
yeah, we've all done it.
Yeah, certainly. But it's interesting. It's just like psychedelics can just kind of give you this, it can just alter your perspective, and it might even just be a very subtle perspective change. But it does allow you to see things from other viewpoints, and you once you start to do that, you can start to alter the way that you interact with other people, and start making positive changes.
Yeah, that's I guess it comes back to intention. And I mean, it's like a greedy intention versus an altruistic one, basically. And sometimes we're just so wrapped up in what's going on around us that we don't realize the way we're operating is kind of based on greed or like a self-centered sort of approach to things. And you can still be a really good person and end up in that situation, like in her case.
Certainly. It's it's just life in general. It's a struggle, isn't it? You just need to make the best of, make the most of it.
Yeah, I saw a girl. I saw a girl at the supermarket one day, had a tattoo on the back of her neck that said, "Life is a beautiful struggle."
Yeah, that's it.
It's like, well, basically, yeah.
It is interesting, It's, as I say, it's a gift that we even exist at all. So make the most of it, and any positive changes that you personally, not you personally, but people personally in general, can contribute to the world. I mean, even this podcast, it seems like it's something quite small in the general scheme of things, but small things add up to large things.
Yeah, the whole from little things, big things grow.
Exactly, it's like a tree, isn't it? You plant the seed, and it grows up. The roots go down deep into the ground, and it grows up.
Yeah, man. So, I kind of love how small it is at the moment. It feels very like core family, just kind of really. I don't know. There's something nice about that, and like, yeah, thank you so much again for coming on and being part of it. I've been looking forward to doing this, man. It's been great.
Yeah.
You've sort of been there this whole time and watched the whole sort of launch and sort of me learning how to do it all. And
it is interesting because I think we discussed, we have some conversations previously where I was saying to you basically like, okay, I've had these psychedelic trips and I've got a lot of value out of them in terms of knowledge and understanding, and the way that I think about life in general and stuff. And I was kind of asking you, well, what now? Now what do I do?
Yeah.
And it kind of seemed like something like this. It almost seems like a natural next step. Almost, it seems like there's almost like a drive, like some kind of drive inside to reach out to other people and kind of share these experiences.
Yeah, I think so. It's been really beneficial for me personally, just to have just kind of share and be more open about my view on things, my experience, which I wouldn't necessarily do at a family Christmas thing with kids around and noise.
Hey family, let me tell you a story about a 1500 microgram LSD trip where I went to another dimension.
But yeah, I would kind of like that. I would kind of love to have a Christmas or just an annual family gathering where we sat around and discussed, and each person took their time to stand up for 10 minutes and say, this is what I've done with my life for the past 12 months. And this is what I'm happy with. This is what I still want to work on. This is how far I've come. This is what I've achieved.
Definitely.
And just, I think that would bring some kind of meaning to an otherwise shallow and hollow, empty sort of just capitalist traditional thing, which I otherwise feel no connection to whatsoever, apart from, just spending time with my family.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because it's in this modern society and stuff, and all this instant gratification with these mobile games, and people are spending more and more time on the phones and things like that, and it almost seems like there's a trend where people are, they're more involved in themselves, and it gets harder and harder for people to kind of share aspects of their life and stuff like that. Whereas when you kind of talk about things that's happening in your life and any issues and problems that you might be having, sharing that with somebody else, and getting their perspective on things and maybe some advice can be really beneficial. But it seems to be that it's kind of getting lost in some ways.
Yeah, and just like the whole podcasting thing.
I mean, what made you decide to start the podcast in the first place? I mean, because you can have a thought, you can have like a thought of, I want to start a podcast or I want to do a podcast, but then the actual doing part of it, like what made you do, actually do it? Because a lot of people have thoughts, I want to go to the gym or whatever, but it's the actual doing part of it, which what kind of motivated you to do that?
Well, I mean, the thought was there, and obviously I'm influenced by like I do delivery driving for work, and I listen to a lot of music, and then sometimes you're just a bit over music and you want to hear podcasts, and so I listen to a lot of podcasts, and it's something I've thought about.
It's an expression as well. It's like an expression, isn't it? It feels that I had there was some like nervousness and stuff like that before coming on, but that's all kind of settled down now. But there's something nice about kind of like just having a conversation and kind of expressing your opinions and thoughts, and getting other people's opinions and challenging your own beliefs and stuff like this.
Yeah, man. Honestly, like, it's a really hard question. Like, I had the thought, but I didn't have any plans, and it just really kind of happened. It just happened. It's just one of those things. It's like an accidental pregnancy. It's like you just do what you love, and then next thing you know, something new's born. Yeah, so I'm just following my heart, man, and it just led me here, and so here I am, and I trust that it's for a good reason, and it just feels right for me to do. So here I am doing it, and I mean, it's early days, but so far it's been so deeply sort of
cathartic.
Just like intellectually stimulating, and almost like a psychedelic experience in itself, but minus the substances, or
it's interesting you say that.
Yeah,
because one of the notes that I wrote down on one of the LSD trips was you don't need to be high on acid to appreciate the beauty in everything.
Fucking oath. I mean, sometimes I get a message from the mushrooms that they sort of say, you don't need mushrooms, you are mushrooms. You sort of embody the spirit of them if you're living right, and I think there's something to that. And I tend to find after we do these things, I have like a decompression and a debriefing session afterwards when we stop recording, and often like that's when we'll actually hit the real stuff. It's kind of like, and it's always, you get this like, oh, I wish we had kept recording, but it's like, no, that's, we've got the surface level and we've got the deeper level, and that's one of the things that my mum was saying was part of her feedback on watching this so far, is just like she, whether or not it's because she knows me so well, tends to pick up on that underlying current of of
kind of reading between the lines, almost, kind of thing,
of everything we don't say. And I think that's just beautiful. That's perfect if we can get that across, that there's so much there and we're just sort of skimming across the surface, but if you can sort of tune into what we're really sort of talking about and the implications of everything, that the fact that it's based on direct experience 90% of the time, and that what we're talking about is real life, then I think that's a powerful thing. That's,
I really like that. Yeah, very well said. Thank you.
Like you said, I mean, the one we did with River, after that, we had a huge talk, and we went through so much stuff, and it was like really deep and just so engaging and so
I don't know, just meaningful. Just like to have a really deep, connective, meaningful conversation with someone for 3 hours that's not recorded, that's between the two of us, that reflects on ideas we've built up over getting to know each other. And you know, after that, he told me he sort of went to his men's group that he does often and sort of was able to bring something to it, which was that
like
I've realized,
kind of like
I've realized this way that I operate, which is maybe negative and self-destructive, which I need to work on, and I'm gonna share that with you all now. And in the process of doing that, release it, let it go, just let it go. And move on.
One of the things I found very useful on these high dosages of LSD, when it's, because it is, you know, it's not an easy ride. One of the things which is kind of reassuring is, you know, what is happening, and just letting go and just relaxing. You know, one of the things you actually told me, which helped me quite a few times, was concentrating on your breathing.
Yeah,
having a steady rhythm to your breathing can really help you on like a difficult trip.
Yeah, it's a lifeline, man. It's something that I learned to do with salvia, and I'd love to talk about it more in future videos. And basically, when I first had got it to work and had a dose that was effective, it sort of steamrolled me, and I learned a lot from the trip, but it was difficult. And
yes, I find that the difficult ones is sometimes it's, you know, they're the ones which you get the most out of.
In terms of takeaways, and I mean, yeah, it's kind of like sweet and salty. You know, you don't just want everything in your life to be sweet. It's kind of sickening.
What's the Alan Watts quote about? Is it Alan Watts where it's like evil exists in the world to
thicken the plot.
Yeah, it's just like if everything was just, you know, super easy and you had everything that you ever wanted, you know, what
I think it was Stan Grof going to see a Indian sort of what do you call him? No, it's not like a shaman, but holy man.
Like just on the topic of Stan Grof, there was a really good interview thing that you sent me, which maybe you can link in the description. I forget what was the name of it. Let me see if I can quickly search it. Do you remember the one?
Not the guy stuck in a bin one.
Excuse me.
We should see if we can watch that before the end to see.
Sure, definitely.
Yeah, if we tag it on at the end, it'll be easy to cut out later if we need to.
Stan Grof. You must remember that you sent me it.
I don't know. It's not ringing any bells, man. All I can think of is this thing called man chilling in trash can. Doesn't want to get out.
Here it is. Stan Grof, The Cosmic Game.
Ah, right. The talk that he does. Yeah, that's incredible. It's worth listening to like 20 times, I reckon.
Yeah, certainly. And I was listening to that on the come up for one of these LSD experiences, and everything just made sense. Everything just kind of resonated, and
yeah,
it's a very interesting one to listen to, and I would highly recommend that to anyone listening to this to, you know, have a look in the description and check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think next time I do acid, I'll probably do the same thing, is go into it with him as sort of like because he's got so much experience. He's probably one of the most experienced therapeutic practitioners of LSD states in the world.
Yeah, well, there's another one, Stan Grof, Lessons from 4,500 LSD Sessions and Beyond.
Yeah,
which I've still yet to listen to the full thing, but maybe you can link that one as well. I think there's probably a lot of insights to be learned from that. And just on that as well, another interesting thing. Usually when I'm doing these LSD experiences, I am listening to music, but I have found that kind of if you're listening to these kind of spiritual kind of interviews, podcasts, it's a really interesting experience to do that, rather than just listening to music, because you can really kind of, your mind's in this kind of elastic state where you can kind of grasp these concepts and you come to these realizations. So that's something else that I would recommend is, on these psychedelic trips, listening to these people, like Terence McKenna and stuff like this.
Yeah,
it
definitely.
can really just like the ideas which they're talking about will, really start to resonate. And you can think about the ideas which they're talking about from a different perspective than usually you would be able to, which is very useful.
Yeah, Terence used to say something like it's very difficult to deliver these talks in a way that it operates on different levels to different people. But that's exactly what he does. And if you happen to be tripping balls, basically, and listening along, it's a completely different talk to you could hear it 10 times when you're straight, and it means one thing. But when you're tripping, it's like
if you're not on these substances and you're kind of listening to it, it's kind of okay, I'm listening to it. But when you're doing these psychedelic experiences, it's more than just listening to it. It's you feel it as well. It's like a feeling.
Yeah, and it's like an understanding that sort of registers in a way that sort of clicks somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It sort of sets into place like, oh, that lines up with this. And because you're experiencing it, because you're in relationship with that experience at the time, you can connect those dots. It just seems like, oh, that fits there. That's where it goes.
It's like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, man.
This one goes there, and this one goes there.
We might try and do a screen share and see if we can watch a stupid video.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll start with the article because they're super short. We can do that for fun.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we are talking about these topics, which there is the kind of a seriousness, but it's also important, just in life in general, to have fun and sometimes just watching silly videos on YouTube or whatever,
So this is 100% serious, legit, actual news from Australia. From The Shovel, and it's the headline is Government gives $7 billion subsidy to Bitcoin after learning it involves mining.
Big into mining in Australia, aren't they?
Oh yeah, we love the mining. Got to mine everything. Mine it to death. All right. The federal government has given Bitcoin a $7 billion check and promised exclusive access to cabinet ministers after learning that the entire concept revolves around mining.
Woo.
Minister for Energy and Emissions Angus Taylor said he wished he had known about Bitcoin mining sooner. I just dismissed the whole thing as something tech weirdos were into. But then someone said it involved mining, and I said, we need to start subsidizing this immediately. The only thing more Australian than expending enormous amounts of fossil fuels to mine a precious resource is to provide a government subsidy to expend enormous amounts of fossil fuels to mine a precious resource, Mr. Taylor said, adding that he looked forward to having dinner with Bitcoin executives to receive advice on government policy soon. Mr. Taylor said Bitcoin was the perfect candidate for government funding. I'm told that Bitcoin creates enormous wealth for a small amount of people while ruining the environment without creating many jobs. It's basically coal with a fancy new logo. Prime Minister Scott Morrison backed the new subsidy, saying he looked forward to a photo opportunity in a high-vis vest and hard hat at a Bitcoin mine soon.
Yes.
There it is. And there's another one that I probably won't read, but I'll just read the headline of a third one, which is that Morrison offers condolences to Victorians going into lockdown. I know what it's like to do absolutely fucking nothing.
Most politicians, to be honest.
Yeah. So we'll see if we can run this video. It's on Reddit. It's called "Man Chilling in Trash Can Doesn't Want to Get Out," which
yeah.
It's pretty self-explanatory.
Thankfully, I've not had an experience like this on hallucinogenics.
Yeah, fully. All right, here we go.
This is the kind of shit I gotta deal with every fucking day. Get the fuck out of here!
Yeah.
Yes! Are you fucking crazy?
Yep.
Dude, the cops are literally across the street.
Does it look like I
What the
give a shit?
fuck? I just took your fucking bike.
Does it look like I give a shit?
Apparently not. Because you're sitting in the goddamn garbage can.
Because you're a fucking hater.
Dude, you got a fucking cable around your neck. Why don't you fucking pull it?
Why don't you go focus on someone else?
I'm not stalking somebody in the trash can. I'm trying to get you the fuck out of somewhere you don't belong, you fucking
I belong
moron.
where the fuck I want.
You don't belong anywhere, apparently. What the fuck are you doing?
I'm just minding my own fucking business. What I'm doing. What are you doing?
You're swimming in a goddamn trash can.
Yeah, you're watching.
Yeah.
Fucking weirdo.
Yeah, and you're about to go
Hey, guess what?
viral.
I got 2 tablets, bitch.
Apparently, you do have 2 tablets.
Want me to prove it?
You know, I've taken acid too, and it never did that to me. Wow. Like, you must be weak.
I must be weak.
Yeah, I'm weak. Yeah, come on. Yeah, let's go. Let's go, bro.
What's up?
Let's fucking go. You don't even know how to get out of the goddamn trash can. You want to fight? You got a fucking power cable around your neck. You want to fight? You really want to do this, bitch?
You want to get your ass whooped?
You're not gonna do it.
Ass whooped?
You're not gonna do
Nigga,
it.
get the fuck out of
I
here.
got a knife and a gun. What do you want, bitch? What the fuck do you want, bitch?
I'm in a garbage can.
Yeah, you're in a fucking garbage can. You're a big man. You're a fucking big. I ain't scared of you shit.
What's up, Judge?
All right, we're gonna do this, huh?
Come on.
Don't make me put this bitch on pause. Don't make me put this bitch on pause.
Why you backing up, bitch?
Because I don't want to hurt you.
Why you backing up? Huh?
Shut the fuck you, fucking moron. Yeah, fuck off. All right, we're going on pause.
Yeah, but no, it's interesting. It's funny. I like talking to you because you've got a similar sense of humour to myself. It could be something to do with, like, you know, the British and the Australian connection, but the British people they have kind of like a very sarcastic, dry sense of humour, and seems like you have quite a similar one to that.
Yeah, possibly. I haven't given it much thought, to be honest. Australians are pretty funny in general.
Oh yeah, definitely.
We don't take anything seriously at all.
I love watching some clips on YouTube of like Australian news. It's just some absolutely hilarious interviews with some Australian people.
Yeah.
Very, very funny. Especially that one, that guy who's in a car and he's like, you might need to link that one in as well. Edit that one in. Like smashed up his car. He's obviously been drinking. The police officer comes over and he's like, you know what's happened and all this kind of stuff. He's like, nothing. Just waiting for a mate.
Yeah, just waiting for a mate.
He's like, oh, you've been in an accident. He's like, what accident? He's like, the police officer's like, oh, you know, the one where you've got the one that's caused you the front of your car to get all smashed up. Really good. Yeah, very funny.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not even driving, I'm just sitting here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It looks completely out of it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just full-on space cadet sitting there in a smashed up car.
Just waiting for a mate. But yeah, as I say, you know, it's important to laugh, isn't it, as well, and stuff like this. So it's very healthy, very healthy.
Yeah, fuck yeah, man, it definitely helps. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. What about portals? You know anything about portals?
This is the eternal Seva question.
Yeah. So
portals, flashing lights. Yeah. Have you heard of them? What do you know? Tell me what you know.
You know, I get the impression that you're holding out on me. You're holding back some information, critical information about flashing lights and portals.
If I am, it's not a conscious decision, man. It's like, be more specific. Be more specific. Exactly what precisely do you want to know about the portals?
to put it into context, on a lot of these high dosages of LSD, you find that these kind of like, because at some point, when you do these high dosages, there's no difference between having your eyes closed and your eyes open. So I'd have my eyes open, for example, staring at the ceiling, and out of nowhere, this kind of hexagonal, or I can only describe it as a hexagonal portal, just like starts to emerge, and it looks like a wormhole type thing. I'm just curious to understand more about portals in the context of consciousness. Hexagonal portals. I mean, you any ideas?
No, well, I mean, the birth canal is obviously the portal that we all use to get here. And in terms of mental sort of psychic portals, I think they're just everywhere.
Do you think there could be some kind of, if it's like a wormhole, wormholes are kind of like a link between two places in space and time. I think these exist outside of space and time, but do you think, previously we've had experiences where one of us would be having a trip on psychedelics and the other one is holding the space, so to speak, and you think there could be some kind of connection, like some kind of like psychic link?
Yeah, definitely. But whether that has anything to do with portals is another question.
Well, it's interesting because one of the concepts that I was kind of came up with was consciousness. It's kind of like it's almost like a black hole. It's kind of like a singularity which connects our own consciousnesses to universal consciousness, and you can kind of think of that in terms of a portal in some respects, where our consciousness is like a singularity where it goes down, and that could create links through universal consciousness between other people.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first podcast I did with Tyler, we were talking about things, and he would mention something that was on my notes. And with River, we had heaps of synchronicities happen that it's like his take on it is it's creepy, but it's also awesome at the same time.
It's interesting because I've had like deja vu before, where I'll have a dream and I might not necessarily be aware exactly what the dream's about. I might not necessarily remember exactly the dream, but then later in the day, the same day, something will happen. I'll see something, and you just get this really weird sense of deja vu, and it's like you've seen this exact scenario previously.
Yeah,
it's almost like a precognition type thing.
Yeah, I've had just recently in my life, I've had a lot more deja vu than usual. And it's quite subtle and mild, and it's almost preferable that way because you don't end up just shocked and trying to work out what to make of it. But I have had one specific experience of precognition, and it was quite interesting, even though it was rather meaningless. It was just that I had a dream about in one of the old places I was living at, and I had my car, my Tirana, in the backyard, and was not a lot of room there, but it was somehow jammed in there and parked off the street because it didn't have any registration. And in my dream, someone had moved it forward.
Okay.
And that was it. And it was like, whatever. And then I sort of woke up, got up, went to the bathroom, and as I passed the back door to go to the bathroom, I saw my car and it had been moved forward about a meter. And I was like, what the fuck? And then I spoke to my housemate and he's like, oh yeah, I moved your car. We had to do some blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, this is really fucking strange, man.
There is a very definite feeling that, well, certainly in my experience, it's like this has happened before, or I've seen it before. It's very, very strange. But I guess it kind of makes sense because when you truly think about that kind of the nature of reality, it's the past, the present, and the future all happening simultaneously at the same time. So it kind of makes sense that there could be some kind of link there.
Yeah, I'm definitely more on the side of the there's something sort of mystical to it rather than the scientific, or it's just some glitch in your memory that's playing up. I think there's more to it.
I think so too.
For me, I often get the sense of something will line up, like your visual perspective of life will fall into some kind of sync with a pattern, a defined pattern. That my impression is usually that just it's like a confirmation that you're on the right path.
It's interesting.
I
also have other weird synchronicities where I'll always see if I look at the time, a lot of the time, I'll see 11:11. You see it all the time. It's like just for some reason you get this kind of niggling feeling in the back of your head, and you're like, it makes you look at the phone, and then it's 11:11.
Yeah, it's interesting that sort of that intuition. I think I find as like a male, we tend to have a diminished capacity for intuition, or at least an unrealized one, where it's not sort of emphasized as much as in women. I think they're much more in touch with these sorts of things, and it's more of a common, like, yeah, of course, sort of thing for them. You know, I've spoken to women who said they were pregnant and expecting a baby, and the spirit of the baby came to them in a dream and told them their name. And to me, I find that just fascinating. It's like, what a considerate, kind, respectful soul to just rock up and say, "Hi, my name's this, so and so," and like you don't even have to worry about thinking up a name for me because it's already there.
It is interesting. I mean, there's a lot of weird phenomena, like that, and is there something to that?
Yeah, for sure. And I said that story to my family once, who are mostly women, and they were just like, "Yeah, of course." It was just like a non-event, non-news for them. They're just like, "Yeah."
Thinking intuition is very important. It's kind of like a built-in sense of knowing what's right, I guess. It's like, does that make sense?
Or even just what's about to happen before it happens, or what to do before you know what to do. I think it's really crucial. It's a vital sort of sense that we have, but it's again, speaking from personal experiences, underappreciated. Well, maybe not underappreciated, underutilized and underdeveloped. And like I'm constantly sort of trying to find ways to improve that, but it seems just to be really difficult. And the psychedelics is one of those ways where, I mean, it can be enhanced, but it can also go the other way and it become delusional, just tripping, and you're sort of imagining something that's not really there. So if you have any advice or tips on how to improve your intuition, I'm all ears. I'm all for it, man.
If any listeners are out there, any tips on that? Because I find intuition is very important. It's kind of like if you're listening to something like a podcast and they're talking about some kind of information, it's kind of like intuitively it kind of just it feels right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like pre-rational. It's just like a knowing sense that you don't need to think about at all. It's whereas men tend to be highly sort of analytical, logical, rational, sort of very nuts and bolts, mechanically minded sort of.
Do you think it's got any links to like emotions? Because people say that women are more in touch with their emotions and this kind of stuff.
I'm not sure. I mean, my view on emotions is to try and control them and not be controlled by them. Like, for instance, anger or fear. I think it's really dangerous and unhealthy to be swept up in something like anger, for example, and it
It's
can lead
interesting.
to.
I was listening to some podcast the other day, and they were talking about like anger, and when you're experiencing anger, it's usually it's like a safety mechanism almost. So if you're experiencing some kind of trauma, and you end up getting angry, it's kind of like a protective mechanism. It stops you from kind of experiencing the underlying emotions that are happening, and it's the anger kind of emerges at the top, and you can project that out rather than kind of dealing with whatever's going on, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that podcast I mentioned before with Mikhaila Peterson, she mentioned how during her recovery from autoimmune disease and arthritis, and sort of being written off by the doctors as a lost cause, she got really fucking angry about it, and that was her pathway out, was to just stand up and say no.
It can be kind of like a coping mechanism almost.
Yeah, I mean, there's value in it. There's definitely value in it, and I've heard I'm blanking on her name, but there's a lady that was on Joe Rogan. Christine Hassler, is that it?
Mm-hmm.
And she runs like group therapy sort of things for women and men, but separate. And they have like an anger burn session where they just play like heavy metal and just like express the anger.
Yeah,
just, like, really
that can be quite beneficial, you know. It's instead of holding everything inside, as I say, even just having conversations like this can be quite cathartic. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think there's much. Have you got anything else that you want to discuss?
I think we're pretty good, man. We've done about 2.5 hours, so yeah. Just the whole. Where can people find you, and what do you want to do in the future, sort of thing?
So you can find me on Discord. If I think you can place a link in the description. There's a Junk Bond Trader Discord, which I'm usually on. You can find me in the philosophy channel most of the time, giving some insights onto the nature of reality and so forth. So yeah, you can find me there. You can hit me up on YouTube. I've got my own little channel, which isn't really very active at the minute, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to discuss. So I think we've covered quite a few topics there, and you know, can always come back for a second round.
Yeah, man.
In the future.
I'm really satisfied.
It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, likewise, man. And look forward to doing it again. And just I guess. Thanks, man. Thanks for doing all the work that you do to I guess just improve your own life and your own mental health, and do that work on yourself, which I know is incredibly difficult at times, but obviously, I mean, produces results, which is what you want at the end of the day.
Yeah, certainly. It's not easy, you know. But I am knowing better, and I am doing better.
Yeah, man. All right, we'll leave it at that. Peace,
everyone.
All
right, nice one. Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks. See you later.